This podcast is a Uniting Heart and Soul production and was recorded on land that was stolen nearly 250 years ago. Filthy Hope was conceived and dreamt on Gadigal and Birrabirragal country. We acknowledge these peoples as the traditional owners of these lands and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We here at Filthy Hope pay homage to the ancient traditions of storytelling when we share stories on this podcast. Hello and welcome back to Filthy Hope, a podcast from Uniting Heart and Soul in Wallara, where we dive into the grey spaces where Jesus, life and culture intersect. I'm your host, Jonty Cornford, Creative Director at Uniting Heart and Soul, and with me of course is the Reverend Vanessa Williams-Hankey, Senior Pastor at Uniting Heart and Soul. This week on the show we're starting to look into some of the weird shit in the Bible with a discussion about angels. Are they real? What do they look like? What does the Bible actually say about them? If you like this show and you want to support us, please leave us a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. These reviews really are a huge help. If you're watching us on the YouTube channel, please like the video and hit subscribe. And if you haven't checked us out on YouTube yet, we post videos of every episode every week, as well as shorter bite-sized clips. Please enjoy episode 38 of Filthy Hope. G'day, Ness.
Hey, Jonty.
How you going?
I'm okay. How are you going?
I'm all right. I feel like we're both a bit stressed at the moment. So if we're
Actually, I'm not okay. It was a bullshit response, quite frankly, and I hate that because I'm that radical, honest minister and I don't like not to tell the truth. I'm actually not 100% okay. I've been crook for a couple of days and I'm just a bit frazzled, sort of not feeling brilliant, but I'm feeling brilliant about what we're going to talk about because when we get to talk about things of the heavenly realm, it makes me very bloody excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear some of the stuff that you've prepared on this as well, because I have some thoughts on it and some stories from other people, but I don't have quite the connection to the material that I think you do, so I'm excited to hear some stuff from you.
Just call me angel of the morning, angel. So we're talking about angels today.
Yes, and we're talking about angels as a part of, we're going to start talking about some weird shit in the Bible.
Oh, man.
So
I'm telling you, brother, this Ezekiel reading is what I would classify as weird shit in the Bible. Yeah. When I preached on it a couple of weeks ago, it freaked the poor congregation out. I did all the work on exegeting the text just like I do, and their faces glazed over. They were angry at me. I could see that they were furious that I was dispelling their previous notions of what angels really were. They had the image of, I won't go there. I'll tell you that in a sec.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
We will, definitely. So, yes, I've done some work on angels over the last couple of weeks, and it's been really cool. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And I think I remember, I think for most Christians, whether they're young or if they come to faith later in their life, the moment of realizations that angels in the Bible are not sort of thing. If you're just listening, we've got some angel wings with some feathers on the couch here with us.
Nice feathers.
Yeah.
Snowy white feathers.
They're not always, like you see in The Simpsons, the angels up in heaven with God floating around with the wings and
the little halo.
That's not what
Ezekiel reckons
that's
anyway.
That's not what the Bible says about angels.
Woo,
so it's always pretty confronting when you first read about what angels look like?
I think
how they're
Christmas
described in the
cards
Bible?
and Valentine's Day cards, you know, the whole idea of the cherubim with his big tummy and his bum and his beautiful arrow and his little wings and his little halo, you know, shooting love. I think and the Christmas card angel thing, you know, the angel over the manger, I think it's given us a vibe that they are these sweet little celestial beings. They're anything but little.
Yeah.
And I think they're quite badass because people in the Bible always start by being petrified or terrified by their by them materializing before their eyes. They're freaked out, Jonty.
Yeah.
You know, so what are these things, right? So tell me, if I was to say to you, and I'd be cool to see it here in the chat at the bottom of this podcast, in the comments, when I say angels, what are actually the first things that come into your mind? What do you think of?
Because for me, immediately the image that comes to mind is that what we were just talking about, that culturally appropriated image of the usually
cute,
white, beautiful woman, sometimes a man floating around with wings with a little halo. But as I've grown older, I'm very wary that that's not necessarily that's also not something I have any experience of seeing or experience. That's not a reality for me. Is what angels are. And I think when I push a little bit deeper, I think there's actually some unresolved tension for me in like what an angel is in a literal sense.
And what they do.
And what they do.
Their job tasks are incredible.
Yeah, because some would say that I've experienced angels. I would say that I couldn't point to any experience of an angel in my life.
Interesting.
But there would be plenty of other people that would point to a handful of different things and say that might have been an angel.
Right.
So I think it's an unresolved thing for me in figuring out how I feel about that and how I interpret what Scripture says about angels and how I experience that in day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Which is part of why I'm excited to talk to you about this today. And I've had friends tell me about experiences that I listen to their stories and have no doubt in my mind that that's what they experienced.
Yeah. Because
I know who they are and the way that they tell those stories is so vivid and real that why would I doubt it?
Yep.
So, yeah, it's a topic that is interesting to me because there's some unresolved stuff for me to figure out. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever think when you say angel, one of those images that I get are those crappy little pins that you can buy in a news agency for like $25 that you can give to people that are sick in hospital or give to your mother that you don't really like or somebody that as a token gift that you can shove in a present and they've got some little birthstone in it and it says your guardian angel. I wonder what you think about that. Are angels our guardian angels? Are angels dead people that have been in the earth here that then move to heaven and then become angels? I mean, I wonder if that's what people think.
Yeah.
I wonder. Well, I was horrified to work out that that's actually not what the Bible says. Spoiler alert. Pretty devoed by that, you know. Often you'll hear people say, oh, my mother's, she's my guardian angel. She's looking over me.
Looking out for me.
And caring for me. You know, I don't know about that. The Bible doesn't really say that your mother's looking out for you.
It's interesting. There's an interesting little distinction that I'm making here in my brain as we're talking about this. I don't know how I feel about ghosts either. Yeah. And I wonder what the link between angels and ghosts is. Some people are probably laughing at the mention of ghosts. When I talk about ghosts, I don't necessarily mean, you know, a white sheet with eye holes cut out of it floating around saying spooky things.
Yeah.
I mean the spiritual realm, if that's what we want to call it, rubbing up against the physical realm. And sometimes you get a real sense that you are not the only presence in a room.
Yes.
And I think lots and lots of people would say that they've experienced that, whether or not they say that, or I saw a ghost or an angel.
I wonder. Yeah. And I think the Bible talks a lot about the seen and the unseen.
Yes.
In the spiritual world, and God gives some people the ability to actually see these celestial beings. And there's plenty of evidence of that in the Bible, isn't there? I mean, we've just come off Christmas and we know that an angel rocks up to Mary.
Yep.
And the angel rocks up to the shepherds, and each time scares the shit out of them.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not some little cutie fluffy bunny thing, it's some badass. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, they're frightened. There's 300 accounts in the Bible of angelic interactions.
Wow.
300.
I didn't know that.
That's a lot.
That is a lot, yeah.
Isn't it? You know? And I think about the angels in the Christmas narrative scaring the shepherds. I wouldn't have thought they'd be a scary type of pack of dudes, looking after their sheep, sleeping outside and roaming around. I'm thinking they would be dealing with some pretty heavy stuff out there in the world. And then they see this angel appear and it says that they're petrified. And then I thought about, why would they be petrified? And then you just go to Ezekiel's account of the angels, and there's 4 heads on these suckers, Jonty. With not just 2 sets of wings, but squadrons of wings on these creatures. And they're humongous. And, you know, all different heads, a head of an eagle, a head of I think a lion.
Do you have the account there? Or do you want me to pull it up?
Yeah, let's pull it up. As in Ezekiel's vision, it's Ezekiel 10, isn't it, Jonty?
Yeah.
It talks about the 4 creatures' faces were a hybrid form of animal and human, and they pointed to all 4 parts of the earth. So that meant that they had these full seeing capabilities, north, south, east and west. And I think that that's sort of telling us that there's no spot that God can't see. Nothing can be hidden to his presence and his energy, I would imagine. There's a nod to the idea of there's an eagle is one of the faces, and then a livestock, an ox, and then a lion is represented also in Ezekiel's vision of this creature with these 4 faces. And it had 4 feet and legs with human hands, it is described as having, and many sets of wings. The other thing is they don't just, you know, we think a bit about them flapping their pretty little white wings. They don't. They apparently travel in a forward direction, and they travelled wherever the spirit went, which I thought was really powerful.
It's also in verse 12 here. It says their entire bodies, including their backs, their hands and their wings were completely full of eyes.
Yeah.
They're covered in eyes.
Eyes, man. That is so weird.
Yeah.
Isn't it incredible? Then they also talk about these wheels, wheels with the one wheel and then another wheel. One wheel was inside another wheel, and there was completely covered with eyes around it. Is that the section you're reading?
Yeah.
Oh, and they fly around. You know, you'd think it was a UFO if you were looking at it, wouldn't you?
Do you want me I can read from verse 9. We'll have it up on the screen here. This is Ezekiel 10, verse 9. I looked and I saw beside the cherubim 4 wheels, one beside each of the cherubim. The wheels sparkled like topaz. As for their appearance, the 4 of them looked alike. Each was like a wheel intersecting a wheel. As they moved, they would go in any one of the 4 directions the cherubim faced. The wheels did not turn about as the cherubim went. Yeah. The cherubim went in whatever direction the head faced without turning as they went, and their entire bodies, including their backs, hands, and wings, were completely full of eyes, as were the 4 wheels. I heard the wheels being called the whirling wheels. Each of the cherubim had 4 faces. One face was that of a cherub, the second the face of a human being, the third the face of a lion, and the fourth the face of an eagle.
I much prefer my Christmas card version.
That showed up.
Oh, I'm telling you. So I presented all of this to church and told them about this and showed some really graphic video, which was very confronting. And my congregation were shocked by that, really. And they were confronted and asked that maybe that wasn't the truth. And then I said, well, it's in the Bible. Are you saying Ezekiel what he saw wasn't valid? It's not the real thing? Are you picking and choosing the bits you believe in the Bible because it fits your narrative or your construct? And it turned into, we did church service in the church, and then we went out for morning tea, and then the real sermon actually happened over morning tea, where we pulled apart all our thinking and feeling about it. The interesting thing was the next week I went back and I had to talk again on angels, and I'd written a confession and prayer of assurance, and in it I'd sort of said, you know, Lord, please forgive us because we can't see and we're not hearing and we're not accepting your word as the truth. And then I got slammed in the service. I prepared a Daniel sermon on angels, which was a better version. I thought it was like, at least Daniel sees the angel as a man figure. I thought this will appease the congregation. It's something they can relate to. And I got slammed in the service. I never even got to the Daniel passage, because then I asked the congregation, because we're trying to transform worship in the way that we do things, because I've had the beautiful Reverend John Humphreys in with me, helping me along the way, to look at services with a different set of eyes. And I opened up by saying, guys, tell me, have you had an experience of angels? But I'd lined up a lady that I knew that had a physical angel experience, so that I could kind of go, see, no, angels are a thing.
Yeah.
And I had her ready to share. So I broke the congregation into groups, intergenerational groups. We had young people leading, and I gave them lots of paper and lots of coloured pens, and they had to address some questions and talk about angels. What did they look like, and did they have any experience of angels, and are there any questions that you have about angels? And I said, okay, I was expecting this to take us no more than 4 minutes, and 27 minutes later, they kept telling me to stop, wait. They were deeply enmeshed in what they were doing, so I let it roll, of course, and then each group shared. And I was so humbled and blown away by the things that they shared. One of the sharings was about a gentleman, a lady's husband, who had drowned when he was a young boy. And he drowned and he was on the beach, unrevived. They couldn't revive him. And then somehow he came alive again. His story about that was he was visited by angels and he could hear them singing to him, and with that he woke up. Now, I was just gobsmacked by the sharing by this lady in the church, and by her belief in these celestial beings. I had another person talk about an experience in the war where their vehicle had gone over a bomb and it didn't detonate, but it detonated the second vehicle, and they felt the presence of angelic protection around them at that time. They are a believer. I had another person share an experience of her mum passing away. She wasn't old and she died of cancer, and her mum had always said that she would, don't worry, darling, when I go I will visit you, in the form of ladybugs. And these ladybugs appear for this family in these deep moments when they just need to feel the presence of the mum around them. So really powerful stuff. And then I shared my experience of, I don't know whether you call it an angel or the Holy Spirit or God's protection. I think it's all a part of that unseen realm. I haven't seen an angel, but I've felt the presence, like there's somebody else in the room, like there could be like a breath. Somebody, you know someone's behind you, that feeling of somebody's there, and you go to turn and you go, oh, hello, yeah, you're there, hello, oh, you surprised me. That feeling like there's a something there. I've had that feeling numerous times. I've actually been in church when I was at Dural Baptist, and I've heard other voices when I'm on the platform singing that weren't in our group, and I felt that there was the presence of angelic voices joining us in our worship that morning that I could hear. It was really weird. I thought I might have needed meds after that. It was so odd, but so peaceful and so calming. And then I shared the experience of my daughter being in that massive car accident. I think I've shared it before.
I think you have, yeah.
And that she was meant to die in that moment. You know, the guy rocks up and he says that Ginger's there because her car was in front. Aurora gets taken by ambulance to the hospital, and the Towie says to Ginger, so babe, what's the story with the person in the car, in the Suzuki? Did they live? And she said, yeah, she's on her way. Not sure if she's got spinal injuries, but she's on her way to the hospital. He said, oh, mate, she was a lucky bitch. He said, don't normally get out of that one alive. Because the car was completely crumpled. It was just like a concertina together into a smulch. Aurora talks about getting out of the car and somebody appeared out of nowhere and just she had no shoes on and she was walking on on the glass, and she didn't know what she was walking on, and somebody came and lifted her off that and took her to some safety. She doesn't know where that person was, who that person was, where they came from. And there was another person that just turned up, this huge guy that diverted traffic. She doesn't know where they came from either. She never saw them again. Didn't know how they materialised. And I wonder, are they those angels that God just places in the form of humans in those moments for our protection and our safety? I don't know. Bible talks about that. I don't know if that was one of those. I'm just totally making that up. But I have a strong sense that God, angels, Holy Spirit, it was a God-intervened moment. God showed up in that moment and protected a whole bunch of people that day. Even the driver who smashed into Aurora at 70 k's an hour off the bridge. And I think, wow, that's phenomenal. Another woman, last story, Jonty, another woman in my congregation shared about, she'd moved countries. She moved to this country and she was desperately alone, feeling very lonely and very sad and missing her beautiful family. And she was sort of at a wit's end. And she was praying, walking and praying. And she turned to her right and she said there was an absolutely humongous angel right next to her. She had to look up like that. I think she described her knees, his knees at being at like a eye level like that. And then she turned to her other side and there was another one there. So she had two just walking alongside her. I go, oh, and I believe her, 100% believe her. I think, oh, aren't you blessed? Because sometimes in the Bible, God reveals to some people these celestial beings. Not everybody gets that vision or gets that ability to see, but some do. I think, oh, how blessed are they to have a moment like that, to see that. I'm a strong believer, Jonty.
Yeah, and I have friends and acquaintances who have very similar stories. I won't tell the whole story and the personal element of it because this is for them to share, but the bones of it is a friend was leading at a camp and had a relationship with a First Nations kid who had been at the bottom of the ladder of every aspect of life, was just struggling in every single aspect of their life. They had scars up and down their arms.
Yep.
I don't think their parents were around. Just was a rock bottom. And this friend of mine had this relationship with this kid at this camp, and the kid shared his story to him, and then at the end said, I've never shared that with anyone before in my entire life. And my friend he describes it as being totally ill-equipped from a leadership perspective to deal with that situation because he was young at the time. And so was a bit rattled, and they both had to take time to decompress by themselves. Never saw the kid again. Knew the kid's name though, and later found out that kid's name translated to angel.
Wow.
And talks about that experience as being a real life encounter with the gospel, in the sense of the first will be last and last will be first.
Love that.
Which I find really powerful. Whether or not I believe that was a capital A angel is kind of irrelevant, because right. That wasn't my experience. And I do think, if we're going to get technical, I do think that part of how I believe the experience of angels happens for us is in an intensely subjective experience. So I do believe that in experiencing an angel in whatever capacity that happens for you, happens only for you, if that makes sense.
Yep. Because God will meet us where we're at.
That's right.
And He knows us intimately and who we are and how we're created and what moves us. I 100% believe that, Jonty, 100%. I've told you about my white fluffy cats, haven't I? You know, have I shared my white fluffy cats on the pod?
I don't think so. You've shared about feathers.
Yeah, the white fluffy cats are next level weird shit. Now, the white fluffy cats aren't in the Bible.
Yeah.
But I think they are some kind of God thing. And I can only describe it as that. I asked God when I was 25 to show me a sign. And if He showed me a sign, the sign, and I was really specific about the sign, then I would believe that this God palaver was a thing. And the lady said to me, so what are you going to ask God for anything, Vanessa, and He will give you anything. He'll meet you exactly where you're at. Yeah, I'll give Him where He's at. I'll think of the trickiest thing for God to, create. And the image I gave was a snowy white fluffy cat with iridescent blue eyes. So in that moment, Julie prayed with me about this white snowy cat. She must have shit herself, about, oh my God, Vanessa, what are you? She never ridiculed me, never anything, never judged me. And I just went, okay, if that's a thing. And she said, so if this occurs for you, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to believe that God's a thing. And then I had a snowy white cat thing. And it was so personal for me. It jumped out in front of me and stood there. And if a cat could put its hands on its hips and sort of go, bitch, look over here. If a cat could do that, this bloody cat did that thing. And it stood there on the path and gave me attitude. And I went like this, had one of those moments. And I continued to have white snowy cat moments for quite a bunch of years, at really odd moments where white snowy cats don't appear. They only turn up on a dine ad on the telly, don't they? They're quite hard to find, these snowy white cats with blue iridescent eyes. Persian, that was the look, right? And then I said to God, after I became more of a mature Christian, I don't know if I'm one yet, but at some point, I said, Lord, I've got great faith now that you are who you say you are, and I'm a strong believer. You can back off the cats. So hold off the cats. I know that's probably hard for you to front those up, and there's other people that need cat stuff. I'm good. So the cats sort of stopped for a period of time until 2 years ago. And I was praying to God about the call to leave from MLC school and move to Woollahra. I didn't want to go. I must have said that a million times. I must offend people when I say that. I didn't want to go because I didn't feel good enough. I didn't feel clever enough. I did all the things you do when you're me. And I said to the Lord, sobbing on my way home, I was on the Gore Hill Expressway at 9:00 at night, sobbing, snot, makeup, the whole thing. Lord, if you want me to go and answer a call to that bloody place, you're going to have to produce a sign. I need a sign. Literally. So then from the Gore Hill to Newport, I prayed and prayed and prayed. And I was coming up my street, which is a hill, and all of a sudden, this bloody, huge, snowy white cat, didn't get close enough to see if it had iridescent blue eyes, but I suspect the bastard did, ran out in front of my car, stopped on the other side of the road, put its hands on its hips and gave me the, you're looking at me, bitch, here's your friggin' sign. It was one of those moments, Jonty. I was on the phone to my friend Carol Ranucci at the time, sobbing about this thing, and she thought I'd had a car accident. And I got home and I raced next door and I told her what had occurred, and I knew that if I was offered the call, then I needed to accept that. That was a whole another level of trauma for me.
Yeah.
But the sign was so intense, and God knew that was a sign that I needed, because he knew that I knew that was directly from him. So is that God sending cat angels?
Cat angels.
Meow! Big, fluffy. Can we put a picture of my big Maine Coon up now?
Sure.
This is my cat Buster, and he is just like my cat angel. So on the strength of that, I went out and bought one myself, so I've permanently got one at home. Is that God sending me a cat angel? Is that God using nature in some powerful way? I mean, is that cat teleported from heaven? How does God make that shit happen? Jonty, I don't know the answer to any of that, but I can honestly say that it's a God thing. And I 100% believe what I'm telling you.
Oh, and like
100%.
I believe you.
Stake my life on it. Like, it changed my life because of that sign. Completely believing that was from God. And interestingly enough, back to the angels, you know, the feather version, at my induction at Woollahra, my friend Kim, she sees in the spirit. She told me afterwards that she saw 2 huge angels. You know how that church is there, one on either side, massive wings, just standing there, massive swords, massive wings, protecting God's house.
That just
Blew my mind.
unlocked a memory. I remember talking to someone substantially older than me who was a leader on a camp that I went on when I was 13 or 14.
Yeah.
And when I was becoming a leader, and we spoke a little bit about that kind of journey into leadership a couple of weeks ago with Somerset, but in one of those like really amazing mentor relationships with another older Christian, they told me about how weird they found it when they were leading at this camp that I was at when I was 13, where one evening after all the 40 odd kids from around the state had gone to bed, and the leaders were sitting around the campfire debriefing and praying and talking about the next day. One of the other leaders just spoke up and said, "Can you guys see the angels standing in a big circle around the campsite keeping guard?" And they're all just like, initially they all were like, "No, what the heck, that's super weird." But one by one they all just were like, "Yep." And I remember hearing this going like, that is so weird.
And they could see it.
But this person that they said, like, until that point, I was so skeptical and I thought everyone was going crazy. But then, like, I just saw them. I still don't quite know what to make of that. I feel a little bit like Thomas sometimes.
And for all of our friends that don't know who Thomas is.
Yeah, sorry, that's a church nerd thing.
Unpack Thomas.
Thomas being the follower of Jesus who would not believe that Jesus was resurrected until he physically saw him in front of him and was able to touch him and put his hands in the wounds and the holes in the hands.
Thomas, we call him Doubting Thomas. Poor bastard, what a terrible title.
I identify with Thomas almost every day.
I love Thomas.
I just think like if like it fills me with such confidence and not even just confidence, but I guess reassurance that like even the people that were present with Jesus physically on earth and hung out with him, even they struggled with faith.
Totally.
Let alone us who are 2,000 years removed from Jesus being present on earth in his physical form. So I do feel a little bit like I'm kind of like, well, if angels are real, like in my most cynical moments, I'm like, well, if angels are real, I probably would have seen one by now. But like for all intents and purposes, I have seen one. I just didn't recognize when I saw an angel.
Or you've been protected by a squadron of them,
That's
an
right.
army of them the Bible talks about.
Yeah.
Protection. For those that believe in Christ, we have that protection and that assurance for our lives. That's pretty powerful business. And I think that's what happened for Ginge and Aurora in that car accident that day. I think there was protection around them. Can I read you a story?
Please do, yeah.
Billy Graham, who was that famous evangelist in the 60s, said this. He recounted a story from a pioneer missionary called John G. Patton in the New Hebrides Island in the South Pacific. And one night, hostile natives surrounded the mission headquarters, intent on burning the Pattons out and actually killing them. John and his wife prayed during the terror-filled night that God would save them. And then when day broke, they were amazed to see that the attackers had actually left, and they thanked God for the protection. Now, the interesting part is that a year later, the chief of the attacking tribe actually gave his life to Christ and became a Christian. And John Patton asked him about that specific night and why was their life spared? What happened? Because they thought they were going to die. And the chief replied, well, who were all those men that you had there with you that night? And John said, it was just me and my wife, mate, no other men. The chief argued that they had seen many men standing guard, hundreds of big men in shining garments with drawn swords in their hands. They circled the mission area where the Pattons lived so that the natives became afraid to attack. And it was in that moment John Patton realised that God had sent his angels to protect them. And the chief agreed. Bam! I just love that.
It's a powerful story, yeah.
So powerful.
Yeah. I think something that's resonating with me a lot is less so the protection element. Not that I don't think that is a thing, but I think for me personally, and I'm wondering if there are other people listening who are feeling the same way, I'm very aware that I live a very protected, safe
existence anyway.
Life.
Yeah.
And I think when I reflect on perhaps when I felt the spiritual realm meeting me in my life and interacting is more of what you were talking about when you were considering and praying about the call to come to Wallara.
Yeah.
That interaction with the cat, whether or not we want to call that an angel or a sign or whatever.
Big fluffy bastard is what I say.
That wasn't about protection.
No.
That was about guidance and
yes.
a prompting almost. And I think for me, when I felt there have been a couple of occasions where I feel like I don't really have a choice, that I feel like I'm meant to be doing something. And that to me feels like a tug or a nudge. That when I consider the alternative of not doing whatever it is that I'm praying about or considering, it's not even an option in my brain that like I can calculate.
Do you think, and why do you think that happens?
Well, the first time I've experienced that was the first time I went into paid ministry.
Yeah.
The role of children, youth and families worker at Turramurra Uniting opened up as a part-time role. And I was in my second year of university studying to be a writer.
Yeah.
Had no interest in, I was a youth group leader.
Yep.
And I was very active in the life of my church, but I had hadn't even ever considered the possibility of going into paid ministry as a job.
Yeah.
All of a sudden the role opens up and I just can't shake this feeling that I think that's what I'm meant to do.
Yeah. Incredible.
As it transpired, that didn't turn out to be what I was meant to do long term. But I think the person that I am now compared to the person that I was before I took that role, the amount of growth, the amount of development and just the amount of change that has occurred, but for a whole bunch of reasons. But I think going into ministry is probably one of the biggest shifts that my life undertook and is still undertaking.
Yeah.
And until that point, I had it wasn't even on my radar. But all of a sudden, I just felt this tug towards it, and I couldn't. Like at some points, I couldn't sleep. It was just like this radar going off in my brain. And until I answered that call, it wouldn't stop. And so I wonder for me if that was, if not an angel, some sort of spiritual guidance happening, whether that's you believe God. We don't need to. Well, maybe we will do a predestination episode at one point.
Please.
So we're not going to dive into it now because we'll go for another hour. But whether or not you believe in predestination, I don't know. But I don't know how I feel about that. But I certainly do feel that God had a hand on guiding me in that direction. Not necessarily with an outcome in mind either. I think this is something I've been reflecting on recently, and I think could be valuable to this conversation is like we Christians love the overnight transformation. We love to skip to the season finale of The Biggest Loser to see the transformation. Yes. That's not reality, and I think that we place such unfair expectations on people, on Christians, to suddenly, bam, life changed, straight path to heaven, we're all perfect disciples of Jesus, when in reality, like, that doesn't happen like that. And I think if we're talking about the experience of having angels interact with our earthly lives, I've often felt, I've talked to other people who it's almost this expectation that like, well, if you don't see angels all the time in your life, then you just need to flick this switch and believe in them and suddenly they'll appear. I don't think that's the case. I think it unfolds like the entire journey of discipling.
Yeah.
It's not an instant transformation. No. It's a journey and it's a process.
Yeah.
And processes take time and commitment.
And I think some people, God knows us so intimately and well, which I've said earlier, but I think he gives us what we need when we need it. And some people, you know how some people can have these wham moments and they go from 0 to 5,000 in growth.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, I've been slogging away at this forever and look at you, you bastard. You're already there. I think when I say that, I think about my husband. You know, I'd been going to church for 7 years. I'd been plugging away and loving it and having this whole Jesus, beautiful Holy Spirit growth and development. And Rob wasn't into God at all. And then Rob has an encounter with the Holy Spirit and has this huge moment. And then within 12 months, the guy with his PhD or in molecular biology, decides what he's going to do is he's going to enroll in Moreland College and start his theology degree. what? Because that's what you go and do. And in 12 months, and I was pregnant with Slink at that time, so it was less than 12 months, Rob's Christian growth was exponential. And I think he just shot right past where I was, and I was slugging it out for 7 years. I think, is it because he's smart? I don't know.
But I think that...
What is that?
That in that there's almost this expectation that there's an end goal of being the perfect Christian.
Yeah, well, he's not on any level.
And none of us are.
No, that's
none
right.
of us are. And so I think I'm not discrediting what you've just said, but like the idea that he overtook you.
Well, he did. I felt like he became really what seemed to take me a long period of time. He got there really quickly. And I think God's really clever like that, because he really needed to, because Robert had an affair, I was pregnant with Aurora, and I was watching him for 10 solid months. And it's like that growth and his transformation in that time saved our marriage. And I think God knew that. God knew me intimately, and he knew that what we needed as a couple so we would survive this thing was what God did in Rob. And it was beautiful. I was jealous at the time that he just was so clever. I thought it was because he was brainy. It was just God did a number on him.
I used to experience that a lot. You look at other Christians and go,
yeah, I know.
And it can be hard because we're kind of wired that way.
Yeah.
To be jealous. And in a lot of cases, jealousy is a good thing. Like the Bible talks about God being jealous.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack there about what that actually means, but at its root, jealousy is kind of, I often for me is rooted in this desire to be better.
Same.
And when you see people that have achieved things that you want to achieve, whether it's in your discipleship journey or if it's at work or if it's in sports or whatever, often the jealousy there is like, well, I aspire to that.
I want
and
that
I'm jealous.
also.
So therefore I'm jealous of what that person has, and being able to identify where the jealousy can balloon into things that are unhelpful and where the jealousy is actually pointing to something that's worth spending time on and attention on is really tricky, because at the end, like I remember growing up and suddenly I'm an adult and I'm chatting to people who 10 years ago I thought were these saints and like pillars of the faith, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, they're just as fucked up as I am.
Yes. They're not that clever.
Yeah, but they're also,
I know,
don't have it all figured out.
No.
And I'm having a beer with them at the pub and they're explaining to me how they're not sure that God exists anymore because of this, and this, and then can you please help? And I'm like, I thought you I'm 19. I thought you were this like...
Had you up here, brother.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is a positive experience of like kind of demystifying this idea that once you're an adult, you got to get all your shit together, especially when it comes to faith and discipleship.
Oh, yeah.
Like for me, at a base level of my discipleship and my following of Jesus is this acceptance that I'm like not good at things and I'm not perfect and I don't have everything together. Because if you do have everything together, why do you need Jesus?
Correct.
That's something that for me is really important, is just recognizing I don't have everything together. And like no one does. And if they say that they do, they're kidding themselves.
Oh, I know. That's right. I'm a minister, Jonty, and it's an office in the church that, you know, we expect our ministers to be something. I'm just not. And I feel like I never am able to measure up to that thing, ever.
I think that the way that I experience ministers and pastors and figures with authority in the church, the way I kind of try to interface with that, and the way that I kind of think is the healthy way of viewing that, is they're leading the way. They're pointing to the path. They're providing you with the tools and the and the things necessary for you to grow. They're not there to tell you, I've figured it out.
No.
Come and do the same thing that I'm doing.
No.
Which I've sat in plenty of sermons from all different churches. I've listened to plenty of sermons online and this is what turns so many people away from the church, I think, is the minister gets up, often it's a he,
says
and
how
says,
it is.
I figured it out.
Yep.
I'm perfect, and if you want to be perfect just like me, do this, this, and this.
Then if you're expecting that, please don't come to Uniting Heart and Soul, because that's not going to happen.
And it's just totally not true and totally not helpful and totally not biblical either.
No, that's right. You get white cats in my services. And feathers.
Yeah. So I think, I don't know. I just think demystifying ministers and pastors as these like people that have it all together.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, there's nothing wrong with, looking up to people.
Sure.
But there's a fine line between looking up to people and idolatry, I think.
Yeah. I've been prone to a bit of that. And then you get really upset when they fall off their pedestal.
Yeah, I think we're all prone to that.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm terrible at it because I like thinking people are great because I want to be like them when I grow up, I don't ever want to know that Reverend Dr. Peter Davis isn't perfect, because he is perfect in my brain. Please don't anybody tell me that he's not, because he's my dude.
Just check Twitter.
It's like, I am prone to that. It's not healthy.
Yeah.
The angel thing.
Yeah.
I think in the 90s, I believe it was, the Pentecostal church went through a bit of angel mania and angel theology, and they started doing a bit of angel worship behaviour. That's what I read anyway. And I think it's really important that we don't replace God with angel worship and go into, now I'm going to pray for angels to look after me and send angel armies and God send your angels. I think we need to be praying to God to release the Spirit for protection, guidance and whatever we need. And in doing that, God does what God does with his angelic hosts.
Yeah.
And let God be God, and God will provide what we need in terms of angelic protection, guidance, and all those other pieces. I think that's really important. Otherwise, we move into idolatry.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
angels don't replace God and the Holy Spirit on any level.
And this is a really tricky concept that I'm still working on, but peeling back the layers of, am I praying to capital G God, or am I praying to a fabrication of God that I've kind of built up through how God has been represented to me, and which I think, if like that distorted view of how God is represented sometimes through the lenses of your church or your culture or your whatever, that I think that is where, for example, praying for angels can come from, because the idea of God being someone that just is like an army, I don't know, what do you call the head of an army? Like a sergeant or something, and then you pray to the sergeant and he sends off the troops.
Oh, that's a good image.
I don't know if it's super helpful, because to me that just I just don't think that's super helpful, and it's also just not biblical. And that I think that's an example of a distorted view of God, because you're viewing God through the lens of how God has been portrayed culturally and religiously and through your different settings. The idea of that you're always looking at God through a different lens. Yeah. And that we're not... Heard the elephant analogy?
No.
God being an elephant and two blind people, or you're in the dark. one's feeling the trunk and one's feeling the leg, and they're arguing about, no, the elephant's this, or no, the elephant's this. In reality, we can't actually experience the totality of who and what and how and when God is.
Yeah. So don't try and tell me that my white cats aren't a thing.
Well, that's right. But
because I'm in the room feeling a fluffy white cat, mate.
That's right. But then in the same way that you wouldn't then tell me that the fluffy white cat is the one experience of God.
No, it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just my experience.
That's right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think of that great book where Colton Burpo, that little kid, experienced going to heaven. I think the book is called Heaven is for Real.
Yeah, we did an episode on the movie.
Yeah. And I've got that vision of Colton describing meeting the Archangel Michael.
Yep.
We're not actually sure biblically how many archangels there are, but Michael's mentioned, Gabriel's mentioned, and there's one other. Is it Raphael, or am I thinking of the Ninja Turtles?
Ninja Turtles. Donatello.
Yeah, I think that's sounding a little bit.
Do they have nunchucks?
Anyway, there's a bunch of archangels. And we shouldn't be laughing about that, should we? Is that rude?
No, I just think the idea of an angel with like a purple bandana.
I love it.
Nunchucks.
Anyway, Colton Burpo sees Michael, Archangel Michael, when he goes to heaven, and he describes Michael as his sword being as big as his daddy.
Yeah.
And that to me was huge to think of that, because if daddy's, say, 6 foot and the sword is 6 foot tall, then if we put a human on top of that in terms of how big it should be, that's a very big angel-y thing.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
And the concept that if you believe in a God that is outside of physics and time and the realities of how our world and reality works, then it's kind of then opens you up to all these scary possibilities that are hard to wrap your head around, of like, well, then of course God, why would it be that difficult to believe that if you do believe in God, that God could send an angel that's 12 foot tall, for example, or what, like, name any crazy, wacky, supernatural event or thing or sign. At the end of the day, it's really, I find this really challenging. It's like, well, you can't really argue with a lot of it, because if you do believe in God, then by definition, all of those things are possible.
And I wonder if the UFOs that people see are actually these wheels with eyes. I wonder if they are, and God's just, sending them out for a bit of a look-see, and their UFOs are actually these wheels that Ezekiel described.
Next week we'll have our tinfoil hats on.
I love it. Weird shit in the Bible, Jonty.
That's right. Oh, we should have tinfoil hats for weird shit in the Bible. That'd be so funny.
I think that's a good thing next week.
Like you said earlier, I would love to hear if listeners or people that are watching have stories about angels.
I would love that.
We would.
Excites
That'd
me.
be really exciting to hear. So feel free, if you're watching, leave a comment or send us an email at filthyhopepod@gmail.com. Or if you you can just send us a message on social media. Like, myself and Summer check it all the time. So,
or if you want to rock up to church on a Sunday at 10 o'clock, come and barge in and tell me about your angel experience. I will stop everything for you to rock up. I'd love that. And my congregation would love that. They think that was seriously sick.
Yeah. Yeah. That'd be cool.
Angels. That's all I got, brother.
It's pretty crazy.
It's crazy, weird shit.
I still don't know how I feel about it, but I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Just pray about it.
Yeah.
Look at it if you get a fluffy white cat. Show them that picture of Buster, won't you?
I'll put Buster back up now. Well, that pretty much does us for this week. We'll see you next week, probably for some more weird shit in the Bible.
Oh, can't wait. I'm loving angels instead.
We've got so many good ones.
It all offered me protection. And the rest. Play the music, Jonty.
I really want to do Paul preaching and a guy falls asleep and falls out a window and dies.
Oh, can we do that?
Moral of the story, don't be boring when you're preaching. That might be next week, who knows? But we'll be back for some more weird shit in the Bible. Thanks for listening. Appreciate your time. You're driving, cooking, sitting at work, not working, listening to a podcast, and say whatever you're doing. We're glad you're listening. I'm Jonty.
I'm Ness.
This is Filthy Hope. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. If this conversation resonated with you or rattled some of your cages, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to get in touch on socials or send us an email at filthyhopepod@gmail.com. Next week, we're continuing to look into some of the weird shit in the Bible with a look at the Transfiguration. If you're a homework kind of person and you want to read up on this beforehand, we're looking at the account that's found in Matthew chapter 17. If you're a churchy, then there's actually a good chance that you just heard your minister preach on this passage this week as well. Until then, always remember, stay filthy, take Jesus seriously, and don't be a dick.